So it's going to be very difficult to tell the truth about yourself if you're going to be joining a group. So this will be very difficult. Let's say, think about like a political group. Name a political party.
Democrats.
Democrats, okay. So now, what do Democrats believe? Or I should use blue. My blues are my desk, so we'll use green. So Democrats, what do Democrats believe? What do they believe in, I should say? What are their political points?
Welfare.
Welfare.
Socialism.
Socialism.
Social justice.
Social justice.
Yeah.
How about some specific things? Proportion, I say. So now let's say that you join the Democratic Party. In doing so, now let's say that you agree with this, you agree with this, you agree with this, but you don't agree with this. It doesn't really matter which point it is, because you're going to find that there are very few people who are going to agree with every part of a political party. But in order to join that political party, by joining it, you now support all of its tenets. So let's say in this case you've got 4 tenets, you only agree with 3 of the 4, and let's say that kind of plays out across all of their political ideology. So that means that you only agree with 75% of what the party is going to be standing for. But by supporting them, you're putting yourself out there as a supporter, which means that in a certain sense, you're having to give up part of your belief system in order to participate in this political process. You have to give up, meaning therefore, a part of yourself in order to belong to this group. And it doesn't really matter what group it is. It could be Republicans, it could be Democrats, it could be a religion, it could be a nation. In order to belong to, let's say, for example, to a religion, I wonder how many people in here who have a religion, if you listed all of their tenets, you were to go down the line and go, yes, 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 yes. Or if you go, probably. Well, I mean, it's an old thing, so we have to update it for modern times. Yeah, I agree with that one. But if you join the religion, you're supporting the whole thing. And so there isn't really a way of joining a group without having to give up part of yourself. If any of you guys were participated in the protests, I guess it'd be 2 years ago, you're all a bunch of store-burning rioters, right? Of course you are, because some people did that. In other words, maybe you weren't doing that, but if people within the group were doing it, then that means that the group was identified that way. And if you say, well, I was in that group that was doing it, but I wasn't the one doing it, well, you give up part of yourself. Okay, but that's how we see you now, because you were participating in that group. In other words, when you join a group, you get represented by the group. You're no longer an individual. You kind of get assimilated into that group now. And there's a trade-off. What do you get out of it? Well, if you join the Democrats, you get political power. Now you get, you're joined together with hundreds of millions, well, tens of millions of other people, and then maybe you by yourself have no political voice, but all together you do have a political voice. But it isn't really your voice. It's the voice of the collective. The same is true with a religion. Maybe you don't ascribe to all of the ideas of a religion, but by joining it, you get community, you get support, you get a sense of belonging, you get a sense of meaning and purpose, but now you have to give up other parts of yourself which you don't agree with things. And it isn't so much that you have to sit there and go, fine, I agree with everything. Even if you are vocal about not agreeing with everything, you're still represented by that group. So again, there's value in joining the group, which is, depending on the group, there's benefits. And then of course there's also the negativity part. The negative part of it is that you lose the self. And so by joining religions and nations and social groups, it really is this thing of escaping self. And so it almost becomes a question for some people, because you will see people who will join groups specifically for that purpose, to escape themselves. They don't find a meaning in themselves. They don't find a purpose within themselves. And so they join a group because it promises something like that. Now, we tend to talk about people in this way in very negative terms, like, oh, that's because they're weak. Who isn't? I find that people who say things like that typically are awfully weak themselves, just in different areas. And we're very quick to judge people who do stuff like that. It's important for us to understand why people do that kind of thing. Because I would suggest that we all probably do those things in some capacity. And it's very difficult to escape. So for example, I wonder how many people, not you guys I'm sure, but how many people you know who will espouse certain positions, especially like social justice positions I mentioned earlier, or certain religious positions, or fill in the blank, whatever it is, just because you don't want to get a bunch of shit talked about you online. Or you're afraid that if you don't support it, that people around you are going to start to give you a hard time, make fun of you or whatever. Or worse yet, my goodness, you can clutch our pearls, they're going to call you names because you don't agree with certain things. I think about what a blessed place we're in this world right now, where some of the worst things that can happen to us is that we can be called names. I was talking with last period about this. I wonder how many of us, if we found ourselves living in the 1930s in Nazi Germany, how many of us would have been concentration camp guards? In other words, if the Nazis came to us and drafted us, gave us a uniform and said, your job is going to be to guard these camps. I wonder how many of us would say, drop the rifle. I will not. Because I stand against all forms of hate and prejudice. If your immediate answer to that is, oh, that would have been me, I would have resisted it, I would suggest that you might not know yourself very well. Because the kind of pressure that was put on people to do those kinds of things was not light. And I think about, again, today, some of the worst things that we can imagine happening to us is that we're going to get called names by strangers online. And then people will send us lots of messages calling us names online. Versus there, oh, you don't want to go along with it? Well, then we're not just going to call you names, we're going to put you in the camp. We're going to put your families in the camp. You're going to be tortured and murdered. Many of us would probably go along with it. And that isn't to say that all of you would have gone along with it. I don't know you. You know yourself far better than I do, of course. But I wonder how many of us really would have been that one out of several 100,000 who actually did resist, who actually was able to stand up against it and lose everything in the process. And these people do exist. But understand that when you join a party like that, and then you start to guard the camps and do everything that was being demanded of you, that was an escape from self. And you'll notice that afterwards, many of the Nazi concentration camps, many of the Nazis generally just said things like, I was just following orders. I was just doing what a soldier's supposed to do. I was just, whatever, fill in the blank. And that's because it's a desire to escape from self. Because to escape responsibility, personal responsibility for what we do, is to escape from self. And it isn't a matter, and again, we tend to think of this in very negative ways. I want to escape responsibility. So you want to be irresponsible. No, because having responsibility for what we do carries a lot of really heavy things along with it. It isn't a trivial task. It's not small. It's a really big deal. Getting down to it, it really is a matter of self-existence, which is a bigger idea. I'll hit on it later on in the semester. But it's the idea that if you adopt responsibility, then that means that you're adopting freedom. And freedom is a scary thing because then you're responsible for how things turn out. If I come along and give you an assignment, and I tell you every step all along the way how to do it, and you just copy down what I say, then you're not responsible for the results. But then again, that means if things turn out great, you just look at me and go, Scanlon told me to do it. But then again, if things turn out well, same thing. Oh, give all the credit to Scanlon, he told me to do it. If instead I give you all the responsibility and say, go for it, which is going to happen here in about 5-10 minutes, then you're responsible for how things turn out. If things turn out great, you can say, I stayed on task, I did what I was supposed to, here's my product, great product. Or afterwards you can sit there and go, oh my goodness, I didn't do the work I was supposed to, now I'm behind in the class, now I'm behind in my other classes, and now you're responsible for that as well. And so that becomes a really terrifying thing for a lot of people. Well, I'm sure you have classes that kind of do both of those things now, where you're given a lot of freedom to do something, and then you're given very tight controls on things. And you can usually see, by the way, the kind of people who are used to those things. I'm thinking of... No, I'll leave that one alone. So, the more the less justified a person is in claiming excellence for themselves. In other words, the fewer reasons a person has to claim excellence for themselves, the more ready they are to claim excellence for whatever group they've joined themselves to. And this is why we join ourselves to groups. We oftentimes, by the way, join ourselves to groups that we think are going to win, not to groups that we think are going to lose. Nation, that's pretty typical. You just kind of join yourself to one. Whichever one you're from is usually the easy way to go. A religion, we'll typically join a religion that we see as kind of like winning in certain ways. Social groups, same thing. We don't usually look for a social group that's failing. We usually look for one that's doing pretty well. One asterisk is Padre fans. Join yourself to the team, whatever, losing. And so, the more that we want to give up ourselves, the more we want to join ourselves to something that we think is going to somehow improve the existence, justify our own existence. By the way, it's one of those things that if you really look at it, you're one individual. And you're one individual among, 7.5 billion on the planet? You guys ever look out at space and see just how big it is? You study it and you see just how enormous it is. How long does it take to get to the moon? Anybody know?
6 months.
3 days. 3 days. And the thing, when you look up at the sky at night, it is right there. You can make out features of it. That's how close it is. And you look right at it, and it looks like, oh, I can just get on a bus and be there by noon tomorrow. No, it takes 3 days traveling, not at 60 miles an hour, but traveling at space speeds. We're traveling pretty quickly. It takes us 3 days to get there. And then right now you can look out this and you can see Jupiter. I'm sorry, not Jupiter. You can see Venus at night right now. During winter you can see Jupiter. You can see Mars. Mars takes us around 6 months to 2 years, depending on when you go and all that. Jupiter will take you years to get to, and you can see the things in the sky. That tells you how far back everything is. You ever see one of those little timetables? I'm sorry, those are I guess, I don't know what you call them. Galaxy geography? I don't know. It shows Earth, and then it shows Earth in relation to the solar system, and then it shows the solar system in the galaxy, and then it shows the galaxy in relation to the universe, and you can see how tiny we are right here. And if you start to realize how tiny you are just on this planet of 7.5 billion, and then you can realize how tiny you are in the sense of the whole galaxy, and then how tiny you are in the sense of the whole universe, it can be really, distraughting to realize how tiny and small we are. There's something encouraging about that, which can say that no matter how big your problems seem to be, they're really not that big in relation to the whole universe. But there's also something discouraging there, because it makes us think about how small our lives really are. And so if we can quantify, let's say the value of your life, let's say that we were to quantify the value of your life as being 0.0001. However it is we measure that, just imagine it. So what do? You look at your life and you say, holy crap, I'm going to live, I'm going to die, and it's going to have no meaning to it. So what can I maybe do? Maybe I can get married to somebody whose life is also 0.0001. And by doing so, now our lives have doubled in value. Yeah.
Can I use the restroom?
And then let's say that we're going to have a couple of children. So now we have 0.0002 there. So now my life has gotten even bigger. So now I've doubled the size of my life to 0.0004. It's not much, but I'm now 4 times what I used to be. Now I'm going to join, I see myself as joining a nation. So fill in the number there. And then I'm going to join, I'm taking interest in a sports team and in some social group. And in so doing, you can multiply at least the meaning and connection of your life. And this is one of the reasons that we join these kinds of groups, because by joining a group, it gives us a broader scope of meaning, gives us a broader scope of connection, and makes our lives matter even more. Yeah.
Or does that mean that people depend on others to give themselves a higher value?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it means. And so that's the thing that we gain also when we lose self. Because to do that, we have to give up ourselves to a certain degree in order to join ourselves with others. But what we gain from that is a greater sense of meaning and purpose and value. So oftentimes we'll tell people, don't give up who you are. That's great advice if you're not thinking about it too much. I'm not saying you should give up who you are. All I'm saying is that be very careful about who you give yourself up to. Because whatever group you give yourself up to, you're going to be judged by that group, by what that group does. Sorry. And it's one of those reasons that maybe don't join any groups. But of course, if you don't ever join any groups, you're limiting the connection and value of your life in this way. It's a trade-off. Trade-off. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? So our lives are meaningless in the grand scheme of the universe. Happy Wednesday. It's a good day.